Welcome back. Tonight I'm sharing with you a true story from Thailand, a tale that has quietly circulated among travelers and antique collectors for years. The setting feels ordinary. A narrow alley in Bangkok, a small wooden shop where the air smells of lemongrass, incense smoke, and street food, the shelves lined with intricately carved masks glowing under warm yellow lights. But something was terribly wrong. One mask wrapped in white cloth, its wooden eyes seeming to follow anyone who came too close. While the elderly shopkeeper shook her head and whispered, "Some doors should never be opened. Stay until the end, because I'll reveal the ancient rituals and spiritual beliefs behind these objects, and why one simple souvenir could turn your home into a gateway for something not of this world." This is Marut's story, and after tonight, you'll never look at travel souvenirs the same way again. Marut was the kind of person most of us know, or maybe even are. A 33-year-old software engineer from Chiang Mai, quiet but curious, someone who spent his days debugging code and his evenings scrolling through travel blogs, dreaming of the places he hadn't yet seen. He wasn't an adrenaline junkie, not a reckless backpacker chasing chaos, but rather an ordinary professional who worked hard, saved carefully, and rewarded himself with one trip within Thailand each year. That summer, his compass pointed south. Friends had raved about the temples, the floating markets, the street food stalls overflowing with spices and flavors. The land of smiles, they called it, a place where modern skyscrapers coexisted with ancient shrines, where the chaos of tuk-tuks blended with the serenity of monks in saffron robes. For Marut, Bangkok felt perfect, a culture layered with history, a chance to step outside his digital world into something tactile, human, and real. From the moment he arrived in Bangkok, he was enchanted. The humid night air clung to his skin, filled with the scent of fried garlic, gasoline, and incense. Neon signs buzzed above the crowded streets, while vendors called out offers in a language he knew but loved to hear in the city's rhythm. He wandered, wide-eyed, through floating markets, laughing as boat after boat passed piled high with mangoes, coconuts, or bowls of steaming noodles. He snapped photos of golden temples glowing in the late afternoon sun. He scribbled notes in a small journal, determined to remember the details, the colors, the sounds, the kindness of strangers. His ordinary purpose was simple: to collect memories. He wanted stories to tell later, something more meaningful than long hours at a desk and late nights staring at a glowing monitor. And like many travelers, he also wanted something tangible, a souvenir that would remind him, years later, of this trip that already felt like a dream. It was on his final day in the city, when he was wandering away from the main roads into a quieter, older neighborhood, that he found it. The shop was nothing like the tourist stalls he'd browsed before. There was no flashing neon sign, no shelves cluttered with plastic trinkets, no loud bargaining echoing through the narrow space. Instead, it sat tucked into a crooked alleyway, half hidden behind an overgrown vine that spilled from a rooftop garden. The wooden door creaked when he pushed it open, releasing a faint smell of sandalwood and dust. Inside, the air was cooler, hushed. The walls were lined with objects that seemed to belong to another century: brass bowls, faded tapestries, and carvings so detailed they looked alive. But it was the masks that caught Marut's attention. Dozens of them hung in neat rows, their wooden faces frozen in expressions that ranged from serene to ferocious. One in particular seemed to call to him. It was larger than the others, carved from dark wood polished smooth by countless hands. Its features were delicate but unmistakably human. Arched brows, sharp cheekbones, lips curved into a subtle smile. Yet what unsettled him were the eyes. Though made of wood, they glistened as though damp, reflecting the light in a way that made them appear almost alive. When he shifted to the left, the eyes followed. When he leaned closer, the expression seemed to shift, now calm, now stern, now something that looked eerily like hunger. He felt a shiver trace down his spine, and yet, instead of fear, he felt fascination. Behind the counter sat the shopkeeper, an elderly woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and hands marked by time. Her gaze was steady, too steady, as she watched Marit lift the mask from its hook. Her voice, when it came, was low and broken but clear enough. "This one, not for you," she said. He smiled politely, assuming she meant it wasn't for sale. "It's beautiful," he replied. "How much?" The woman shook her head, eyes never leaving his. She spoke again, searching for the words in English. "Not tourist, not souvenir. Some doors," she paused, raising a trembling finger toward the mask. "Should not open." Her warning hung in the air like smoke. For a moment he hesitated. It was easy to dismiss such words as superstition, especially when spoken in a dimly lit shop filled with artifacts. Maybe it was a sales tactic, he thought, a way to build mystery and increase the price. Or maybe it was just an old woman clinging to beliefs from another time. Either way, Marut's curiosity outweighed his caution. The longer he held the mask, the more he felt he couldn't leave without it. It wasn't just art, it was a story, a piece of history he could take home. And wasn't that what every traveler sought? Something authentic, something no one else would have on their living room wall. "I really want this one," he insisted. "Name your price." Oh, the woman frowned, lips pressing into a thin line. For nearly an hour, they went back and forth, his enthusiasm wearing down her reluctance. He promised to treat it with respect, told her how much he admired Thai culture, how he wanted to share its beauty with friends. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she wrapped the mask in a square of white cloth, muttering words under her breath he couldn't understand. Prayers, perhaps, or curses. When she finally placed the bundle in his hands, her grip tightened, forcing him to meet her eyes one last time. "Remember," she whispered, "some doors never close again." He chuckled nervously, pretending not to feel the chill that ran through him. He thanked her, tucked the package under his arm, and stepped back into the sunlight of the alley. Outside, the city roared with life, tuk-tuks honking, vendors frying meat skewers, children chasing each other past neon signs. Everything felt normal, ordinary. Yet he walked away, carrying something far from ordinary. He couldn't have known, in that moment, that he was carrying more than just a mask. He was carrying a key, one that had already unlocked a door he might never be able to shut. Marut returned to Chiang Mai late on a rainy evening. The familiar drizzle pattered against his apartment windows as he dropped his suitcase by the door and collapsed onto his bed without even unpacking. The mask, still wrapped in its white cloth, lay untouched in his luggage like a secret waiting to be revealed. The next evening, after catching up on sleep, he finally unwrapped his prize. Under the soft glow of his living room lamp, The mask was even more striking than he remembered. The polished wood reflected the light, and the carved features seemed alive in the modern space of his apartment. Carefully, he hung it above his couch, stepping back to admire the effect. It gave the room a kind of presence, a centerpiece that seemed to draw the eye no matter where you stood. That first night with the mask on his wall, he slept better than he had in months. The usual tossing and turning, the stress-induced insomnia from work deadlines, all of it melted away. He sank into a deep, dreamless sleep that left him refreshed, energized, and strangely at peace. At first, he thought the mask was nothing short of a good luck charm. Over the next few days, he felt more productive at work, more focused, even more charismatic around his friends. When people came over, they inevitably commented on the mask. "Wow," his co-worker Jirawat said during a Friday night get-together. "That's incredible. Where did you find it?" Marut grinned, proud of the story he now had to tell. He described the hidden shop in Bangkok, the reluctant shopkeeper, the long negotiation. The more he told it, the more mysterious and impressive it sounded. His friends admired the craftsmanship, some even confessing they felt like the mask was watching them. He laughed it off, brushing aside their unease. But soon, small details began to creep into his daily life. One morning, as he brewed coffee in the kitchen, he thought he heard a faint murmur from the living room. A soft, rhythmic sound, like someone whispering just beneath the edge of hearing. He froze, listening. Nothing. When he stepped into the living room, the apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. He shook his head, blaming his exhaustion. Another night, he awoke from an unusually vivid dream. He had been walking through a temple he had never seen before, corridors lined with flickering candles and shadows that reached toward him. At the center stood the mask, though this time it wasn't on his wall. It floated, suspended in the air, its wooden mouth moving as though speaking words he couldn't understand. He woke with his heart racing, drenched in sweat, but quickly reassured himself. Just a dream, nothing more. The dreams became more frequent. Sometimes he found himself surrounded by strangers in elaborate traditional clothing, their faces blurred, their eyes locked on him as though they knew him intimately. Other times he heard chanting, melodic and hypnotic, echoing in languages he didn't recognize. When he told his friends about these dreams, they teased him, and he laughed along, pretending not to care. But a quiet unease had already begun to settle in the back of his mind. One evening, while working on his laptop, he noticed the air in his apartment had turned unusually cold. He wrapped himself in a blanket, checking the thermostat, but the heat was on, as always. He shrugged it off, deciding the building's old system was to blame. Yet when he walked past the mask, the chill deepened, as if the air itself was heavier there, pressing against his skin. The whispers returned too, soft at first, barely audible beneath the noise of the city outside. Sometimes they seemed like chanting, other times like overlapping conversations just beyond his comprehension. At first, he told himself it was neighbors through thin walls. But the more he listened, the more he realized the whispers didn't come from next door. They came from the direction of the mask. Still, he rationalized. Stress, fatigue, the power of suggestion after reading too much online. about Thai spiritual traditions. He reminded himself of the elderly shopkeeper's warning, but forced a laugh at how seriously he had taken it in the moment. Some doors should never be opened. It sounded theatrical, like a line from a horror movie. He convinced himself it was nothing more than superstition. But anyone hearing his story now would feel what he refused to admit. These weren't harmless quirks or tricks of the mind. They were warnings. Subtle, quiet, but unmistakable signs that something was wrong. The mask remained fixed above his couch, its carved eyes gleaming whenever the light shifted. Guests continued to joke that it looked alive. One friend, Anong, even refused to sit on the couch beneath it, saying it made her feel off. He laughed, calling her dramatic. But that night, he dreamed again of the temple, the same endless corridors, the same floating mask, the same feeling that something was watching, waiting. When he woke, he found his keys on the kitchen counter instead of the hook by the door where he always left them. He chalked it up to forgetfulness. Later, he noticed a book left open on his coffee table, even though he hadn't read from it in weeks. Again, he shrugged, convincing himself he must have misplaced it. But deep down, a quiet doubt gnawed at him. The mask had brought him peace at first. Long, restful nights, newfound energy. But now it was bringing something else. Dreams that felt like memories. Whispers that seemed to know his name. And a presence in his apartment he could neither see nor deny. And while he ignored it, rationalized it, and told himself everything was normal, the truth was clear. The mask had not come alone. It had brought something with it, something that was only just beginning to make itself known. It began with patterns, small, repeatable glitches in the rhythm of his life. He'd leave his keys on the hook by the door and find them later on the coffee table beneath the mask. He'd close a book and return to see it open to a different page. The spine splayed as if an invisible thumb held the place. He told himself it was stress, jet lag clinging longer than usual, the absent-mindedness of someone juggling work after a trip. But the pattern returned the next day, and the day after that. Always the same quiet rearrangements, the same soft suggestion that the apartment had acquired its own intentions. The temperature drops became a second rhythm. The cold was never general. It formed a circle in the living room, a ring with the mask at its center. Step into that ring, and the air tightened and thinned. Breath steamed faintly in front of his lips. Step back 2 paces toward the hallway, and his skin flushed as if he'd crossed out of shadow into sun. He blamed the building. He Googled pressure differentials, stack effect, old apartments' cold spots. He even emailed the property manager. No one came. The cold kept time. The whispers followed. At first, they were buried in ambient noise, the murmuring hush of the city, the sighs of plumbing, the distant elevator cables humming in their shaft. But as the week wore on, the sound separated itself and took on a shape of its own. It came from the direction of the wall above the couch where the mask hung. Sometimes it was rhythmic, almost like chanting. Other times it was conversational, many voices braided together, their words impossible to make out. When he turned on a lamp, the sound dissolved like fog in sunlight. Lights off, it returned. He tried to rationalize. White noise app, sleep tracking app, an EVP app he deleted 5 minutes later. He set his phone on the coffee table and recorded hours of audio, only to play it back and hear nothing but the soft whir of the refrigerator. He told himself the whispers were inside his head, a trick of expectation. Still, the pattern persisted. The intensity crept up, step by careful step. The lights in the living room stuttered once, just once, when he walked beneath the mask. The television flickered to a blue screen for a heartbeat, then returned to a paused show. The thermostat registered a comfortable temperature, while the air in the room frosted the rim of his water glass. He bought a small space heater and aimed it directly at the couch. The coil glowed orange. The heat rolled across the rug, and the cold ring remained indifferent. When friends visited, no one saw what he saw. Jirawat dropped by with takeout and laughed at the idea of a cold zone. He stood under the mask and spread his arms. "Feels fine," he said, smiling. Anong came over for a movie, refused to sit beneath the mask, then, embarrassed by her own discomfort, forced herself onto the couch. "It's just intense looking," she said, as if apologizing to the art. Neither noticed the lights flutter. Neither heard the voices. The dreams turned a corner. No longer scattered images, they began where the previous night's dream had ended, as if picking up chapters from the same book. The temple corridors returned, lit by candles that burned with a strange, smokeless blue flame. The air smelled of sandalwood and old paper. He walked barefoot. The stone under his feet was cool, almost wet, and the walls breathed faintly, expanding and contracting as if the building itself were alive. Sometimes silhouettes in elaborate costumes waited at the end of a passage, crowns, collars, layered cloth, and when he approached, they drifted backward without turning, beckoning him along. He started waking at 3:17 a.m. exactly. On the third night, as he lay listening, the whispers grew sharper, like a camera coming into focus. His name threaded through them, soft at first, then clearer. "Marut." He sat up. The apartment was night dark, but not silent. The voices layered, gathered. "Marut." He swung his legs to the floor. The cold bit his ankles. He stood. The voices did not diminish. "Marut, come see." He told himself to turn on the light, to go back to bed. Instead, his body moved. He stepped into the ring of cold. The voices fell silent. Then the room brightened, not with the warm light of a lamp, but with a pallid underwater blue that seemed to seep from the mask's carved eyes. Shapes formed at the edges of the room. People, or the memory of people, rendered in layers of translucence that bled into the walls. They wore traditional Thai garments, shimmering fabrics that held color without casting shadow. There were men and women, young and old, all of them arranged in a loose circle, their faces turned toward him, as if he had just entered a ritual already in progress. No one else would have believed it. No camera would have captured it. But there they were, undeniable. His knees softened. At the center of the circle stepped a woman wearing an ornate headdress, golden tears rising like a delicate crown, jewels set in patterns that suggested both order and hunger. Her face was neither kind nor cruel. It was simply certain. When she spoke, the sound bypassed his ears and arrived fully formed inside his head. "You have opened the door," she said. "Now you are the keeper." The words settled into him like a second heartbeat. Keeper. "I didn't know," he managed. "They always say this," came another voice, male, sad, almost amused, from somewhere to his left. They never know. The ring tightened by a step. The temperature plunged. The blue light brightened until his own hands looked like someone else's, veins like ink beneath the skin. He closed his eyes. The voices didn't fade. They bloomed. Language layered under language. An older sound threaded beneath the Thai and English. Tonal, circular, intimate as a hand on the back of his neck. When he opened his eyes again, the woman was closer. He could see fine lines etched into her not skin, like craquelure in ancient lacquer. "We waited," she said. "You brought us a way back." The circle shifted again. The headdress threw blue light in a dozen careful directions, scattering stars across the ceiling. She raised one hand, palm outward, as if to calm a room that did not breathe. "Listen," she said. "We will teach you what it means." From somewhere deep in the apartment, perhaps from the mask itself, came a faint, resonant knock, like a door closing in a distant hall. The blue light dimmed. The figures thinned, dissolving at the edges. He found himself alone again. The ring of cold remained. On the wall, the mask watched. Its wooden mouth curved into an expression he no longer mistook for a smile. At first, he thought it was exhaustion. He skipped breakfast, missed lunch, and by dinner found himself staring at a plate of food with no appetite. Within a week, his pants hung looser. Friends joked he must have discovered some Bangkok diet. He laughed along, but the mirror told another story. His skin had thinned to a pale, almost translucent sheen. The hollows beneath his eyes deepened, and sometimes, when the bathroom light flickered, he thought he could see faint outlines of veins glowing beneath his flesh, like blue cracks in porcelain. The mask loomed larger each day, though it never moved. Its carved eyes caught light that wasn't there, glittering even in darkness. The whispers had grown into full voices now, clear, articulate, demanding. They spoke his name, sometimes in chorus, sometimes in layers of different tongues that overlapped until a final command broke through. Marut. It was never just sound. Each syllable rattled his bones. The voices didn't come from the walls anymore. They came from inside. At work, colleagues noticed. Jirawat cornered him after a meeting. "Are you okay? You look different, like you haven't been sleeping for weeks." He muttered something about stress, but deep down he knew it wasn't lack of rest. If anything, he slept more than ever. The dreams had become entire lifetimes, scenes so vivid he woke with incense still clinging to his hair. He was living multiple realities at once, and his body couldn't contain them all. The turning point came one night, 3 weeks after Bangkok. The whispers didn't wait for night anymore. They filled his apartment constantly, a chorus swelling with each passing hour. That evening, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at his untouched dinner, when the air thickened suddenly. The lights dimmed, though he hadn't touched the switch. A low hum began, like a transformer buzzing through the walls. It grew louder until plates rattled in the cupboards. The glass of water shivered on the table. He pressed his palms over his ears. It didn't help. The sound wasn't external. It lived in his skull. Then came the blue light. It seeped from the living room, pulsing through the apartment like water spreading across a floor. He rose slowly, every part of him wanting to run and every part equally frozen. When he stepped into the living room, the mask glowed with furious intensity, its carved features shifting from serene to grotesque, lips twitching in an obscene pantomime of speech. The voices rose to a crescendo, then stopped all at once. Silence dropped heavy, unnatural. And then they appeared. Figures filled the room, not shadows, bodies. Dozens of them, dressed in traditional Thai garments, shimmering silks and layered robes. Their faces were pale, drained, their eyes bottomless voids. Some drifted inches above the floor, others stood solidly on it, but all of them faced him with expressions that mingled hunger and expectation. At their center stood the woman in the headdress. This time, she wasn't translucent. She was solid, the gems in her crown catching the sickly blue light, scattering it like shards of glass across the ceiling. Her eyes locked on his, and she raised a hand. "You are Keeper," she said. The words struck like blows. He stumbled backward, legs colliding with the couch. He tried to speak, but his throat constricted, dry as dust. The other figures advanced. Their movements twitched, as if pulled by invisible strings. Their mouths opened, and the sound that poured out wasn't human. Layered scream, high and low at once, metal grinding against stone, bones breaking in rhythm. Objects rattled violently. The television fell from its stand. Books burst open, pages whirling like birds. Glass shattered across the floor. He tried to move, but his limbs weren't his own. His hands rose as if pulled by unseen wires. His body lurched forward toward the mask. He fought, clenched his teeth, strained every muscle, but still he moved. The woman stepped closer, her voice coiled inside his skull like smoke. "You are chosen. The others before you carried us. Now, you will." Behind her, the other spirits flickered. Their faces shifted, becoming men he had never met but somehow recognized. The Ayutthaya collector in a townhouse, the Phuket businessman in a hotel room, the Bangkok art dealer hunched over whiskey. Their mouths moved, and he heard their voices as his own thoughts. "We were chosen. We were Keeper. We fed them, and they fed on us. You cannot resist." He screamed then, or thought he did, but the sound was swallowed by the storm. The cold intensified until his breath smoked in the air. Frost spread across the window glass, spider webbing out from invisible hands pressed against it, and then the woman placed her palm against his chest. The touch wasn't physical, it was worse. His heart faltered, then raced. His lungs seized, pulling in air that burned with frost. His vision dimmed. "You carry us now," she whispered. "You are our doorway." Images slammed into his mind. Faces, centuries of them, each owner of the mask, each life devoured piece by piece until nothing remained. He saw their final moments, their bodies failing, their homes empty, the mask untouched and waiting. He fell to his knees. His hands passed through his own thighs as if they weren't solid anymore. Panic tore through him. He was fading, his edges blurring. The spirits' mouths widened, grins spreading unnaturally wide, teeth sharp and endless. "No," he shouted. "I won't." The woman leaned closer. Her eyes were endless. "You are Keeper," she repeated. His vision collapsed into black. When he woke hours later, sprawled on the floor, the apartment was silent. Frost still clung to the windows. The mask stared down from the wall, its wooden face cracked by a hairline fracture that hadn't been there before. He touched his arm, and for a second his fingers passed through. He understood then. He wasn't just haunted. He was becoming one of them, the next in line. The latest chapter in a story, that had no end and no escape. Marut knew he couldn't survive alone. Each day, the mask drained more of him, his body thinning like paper held to flame. He spent hours on academic forums, hunting for anything that might explain what was happening. Most dismissed him as delusional, but one response cut through the noise. Professor Sirin Shavali, a scholar in Thai studies at Chulalongkorn University. She had written about Thai rituals, folklore, and the spiritual role of masks. When he called, his voice trembled. He told her everything. The mask, the whispers, the apparitions. She was silent for a long time before finally saying, "I believe you, and I know someone who might help." Her contact was Ajahn Samchai, an elderly monk living in a temple on the outskirts of Bangkok. "He has seen this before," she warned, "but you must be ready. The journey won't just test your body, it will test your soul." He didn't hesitate. He wrapped the mask again in the same white cloth, muttering the shopkeeper's words in his head like a broken record. Some doors should never be opened. Return to Bangkok. The city felt different this time. The chaos of traffic, the neon, the street vendors, all of it pressed down on him with menace instead of charm. In the taxi, the driver glanced at the white bundle on his lap and quickly looked away, lips moving in a silent prayer. By the time he reached the temple gates, he was already trembling. The jungle around the monastery had gone unnaturally quiet. Even the insects had hushed. Waiting in the courtyard was a thin, stooped figure in orange robes. Ajahn Samchai's eyes, small and sharp, seemed to pierce through Marut and into the bundle he carried. "You should not have brought this here," the monk said in heavily accented English, "but since you have, we must try." The first ritual. They led him to a stone chamber deep within the temple complex. Candles flickered in wall niches, casting carved symbols in shifting light. At the center sat a small altar. He placed the mask upon it and unwrapped the cloth. The mask pulsed, its features twisted, lips curling into expressions of rage and longing. The temperature dropped so quickly that frost spread across the stone floor. His breath fogged as he stumbled back. Ajahn Samchai did not flinch. He sprinkled blessed water in a circle around the altar and began to chant in a low, resonant tone. The sound reverberated through the chamber, steady and commanding. The spirits responded instantly. Figures erupted from the walls like shadows torn loose, filling the room with their shrieks. He recognized them. The Ayutthaya collector, the Phuket businessman, the Bangkok dealer, all gaunt, hollow-eyed, their mouths open in endless hunger. The woman in the headdress appeared last, stepping from the shadows with calm authority. "You cannot take him," she hissed, though her voice echoed from inside his head. "He is keeper now." The chanting grew louder. Flames surged. The spirits howled, battering against the invisible barrier of blessed water. The sound was unbearable. Metal against glass, screams layered upon screams. He clutched his head, certain his skull would split. But the monk held firm. He pressed a talisman to the mask, and the wood began to smoke, black lines cracking across its surface. The spirits writhed, their forms twisting in agony. Marut collapsed to his knees, gasping. Through the blur, he saw the woman step closer, her face inches from his. "You think he can free you?" she whispered. "Every keeper thinks so. Every keeper fails. You cannot escape us." Scars of survival. Hours later, he staggered out of the chamber, half carried by two younger monks. His body shook violently, as though something inside was trying to claw its way out. His reflection in a brass bowl made him recoil. Gaunt face, eyes rimmed in black, skin almost translucent. Ajahn Samchai knelt beside him. "The connection is weakened," he said softly, "but not broken. The next days will be harder. They will fight with everything they have. You must be strong, or you will not survive." That night, lying on a mat in the guest quarters, he was assaulted by visions. The spirits crowded around his bed, their faces inches from his, their voices overlapping in pleas and threats. "You are ours. We keep you forever. Join us. Let go, it is easier." At dawn, temple bells rang. The spirits vanished instantly. He lay drenched in sweat, trembling with exhaustion. Ajahn's warning. Morning. Ajahn Samchai entered with a bowl of blessed water. "They tried to make you surrender," the monk said. "If you had agreed, even in your dreams, it would be over. They would take all that you are." I can't do this," Marut whispered. "You must. If you do not, they will spread beyond you. They will take your home, your friends, your family." He realized then this wasn't just about survival, it was containment. The mask's curse had to end with him. "Prepare yourself. Tonight we begin again," the monk said. "They will use fear, love, memory, even pain. If you falter, they win." Marut had entered the temple expecting a battle. He didn't expect a history lesson carved not in books, but in his dreams. Echoes of the past. On the second night, as the chanting rose and incense thickened the air, he collapsed into trance. He stood on sand, not in modern Thailand, but a kingdom long since buried. Circles of men and women chanted beneath a crimson sky. At the center was the mask, new and shining, wood gleaming with sacred oil. Priests held it aloft, promising salvation as invaders tore across their land. But the ritual twisted. Instead of protection, it bound them. Souls desperate to avoid slaughter clung to the vessel. Refuge became prison. When the priest died, the spirits remained, hungry, endless, half-human shadows chained to carved wood. He gasped awake, soaked in sweat. The whispers made sense now. They weren't demons. They were victims, human ones, bound against their will. Revelation in the chamber. During another cleansing rite, the blue light thickened. The woman in the headdress appeared again, softer this time. "You saw," she said, sorrow in her voice. "We were people once." "You're not monsters. You're trapped," he answered. Ajahn Samchai's voice cut through. "They cannot stay. Their hunger will never end. But there is another path." "Don't destroy them," Marut pleaded. "There has to be a way to release them." "Few have tried. Fewer have succeeded," the monk said. "It requires choice. Theirs as much as yours. The final choice." On the seventh night, the altar glowed red-hot beneath the mask, surface cracking, black smoke pouring upward. Marut knelt, nearly fainting under the weight of the spirits pressing on his chest. Ajahn Samchai began the final rite, a chant older than kingdoms. The barrier between worlds thinned, and one by one, the spirits materialized fully, eyes wide with hunger and hope. The chant shifted, not binding, inviting. "Choose," the monk said. "Stay in hunger or release into light." The woman stepped forward. For the first time, her composure cracked. Tears glistened across her translucent cheeks. She looked at Marut, then at the mask, then at the monk. "Release," she whispered. Her body dissolved into sparks. tiny glowing fragments rising like fireflies before vanishing. The others followed, the chamber filled with drifting light, centuries of torment unraveling into peace. When the last spirit vanished, the mask shuddered. Its polished surface split down the center with a crack like a gunshot. The wood crumbled into black ash, scattering across the altar. Marut fell forward, sobbing, from exhaustion and relief. The aftermath hours later, the chamber was quiet. Ajahn Samchai sat beside him, lips still moving in prayer. Marut reached for his own hand, solid, warm, alive. "It is finished," the monk said. "They're free. You gave them choice. That was stolen from them long ago. The hunger, the whispers, the icy cold, gone." In their place was silence, heavy but clean. For the first time since Bangkok, Marut felt whole. He understood now what the shopkeeper had tried to tell him. The warning wasn't to scare him. It was wisdom born of centuries. Some objects carry more than beauty. Some carry lives, suffering, chains invisible to the eye. Every strange detail, the prayers as the mask was wrapped, the chill in his apartment, the dreams of temples, all of it made sense now. They weren't coincidences. They were fragments of a story that stretched across centuries, waiting for someone to see the truth. And now he had. So what do you think? Would you ever dare to bring home a souvenir that seemed just a little too mysterious, a little too heavy with history? Marut returned to Chiang Mai, a changed man. He had survived something most of us only hear about in stories, and his lesson was clear. Not every beautiful object is meant to be possessed. Some things carry not just craftsmanship, but centuries of pain, hunger, and shadow. In Southeast Asian cultures, sacred items, masks, statues, spirit houses, aren't decorations. They are vessels, homes for the living, and sometimes prisons for the dead. To remove them without understanding, without respect, is to risk becoming a keeper of something you can never control. So the next time you travel, remember this. When a vendor in a crowded market pauses, looks you in the eye, and warns, "Not for tourists," listen. That hesitation isn't salesmanship. It's wisdom, a reminder that some doors once opened can never be easily closed. Now I want to hear from you. If you were Marut, would you have bought that mask? Have you ever brought home something that carried an energy you couldn't explain? Share your story in the comments. I read every one of them. And don't forget, like this video, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss the next terrifying true ghost story from across Asia. Because tonight it was Thailand, but next time it might be closer than you think.